Taliban takeover of Afghanistan means that Europe is now facing the risk of another refugee influx. How it started, how it ended. This has brought the hashtag refugees welcome crowd out in full force once again. Because it went so well the first time. Seems to be overwhelmingly young men. Don't see many women or children, but I suppose they're all doctors or lawyers in waiting, so why should we concern ourselves? Humanitarian development worker Sybil Schneehager told German WDR television on Sunday, quote, "We can assume that up to 3 million Afghans will make their way to Europe in the foreseeable future." Well, what's another 3 million? Get ready to see European cities put up more refugees welcome posters a stone's throw away from diversity barriers. Get ready to be culturally enriched. But once again, the facts contradict the narrative. Afghanistan will probably be more stable under the Taliban than it has during any time in the past 20 years. Most of the Afghan population welcomes the Taliban takeover, and it's over. The war's over. This situation isn't comparable to Syria. And yeah, there are a relatively small number of people who worked for the US in Afghanistan whose lives are under threat. They're genuine refugees. But 3 million people? They're not refugees, they're economic migrants. As Taliban spokesman Suhail Shaheen told Sky News, most of the people who are leaving Afghanistan are not doing so because they feel unsafe. They're doing it because Afghanistan is a poor country.
Everyone wants to leave Afghanistan because Afghanistan is a poor country. Up to 70% of the people are living under poverty line.
The vast majority of people fleeing Afghanistan are not refugees, they're economic migrants. That's why they want to go to Germany and the UK and not Saudi Arabia, despite Saudi Arabia being the first safe haven. Again, going back to the works of the humanitarian worker Sybil Schneehager, quote, "I always ask people, why don't you go to Saudi Arabia? They are Muslims, this is your culture. The answer is always no. Germany is better." Gee, I wonder why. Saudi Arabia puts them up in remote, rudimentary refugee tent cities with one communal toilet. The UK and Germany put them up in 4-star hotels and give them free money. That's why they want to come here. And personally, I don't blame them for wanting to come here, but that's not the issue. The issue is we tried this already back in 2015 and it was an unmitigated disaster. With a likely runoff election against anti-mass migration populist Marine Le Pen coming up next year, even globalist stooge Emmanuel Macron is worried. The French president is calling for a robust plan to, quote, protect against significant irregular migratory flows from Afghanistan. The vast majority of migrants aren't violent criminals or terrorists, but too many of them are for Europe to put its people at risk again. Polls show 39% of Afghans support suicide bombings in defense of Islam. ISIS bragged about how it exploited the refugee wave to insert terror cells into Europe. There were then a multitude of terror attacks in Europe carried out by ISIS adherents who were either refugees or asylum seekers. The majority of the Paris massacre terrorists entered Europe via the refugee wave. I think of 11-year-old Ebba Ackerland, torn limb from limb by the Stockholm truck terrorist, a failed asylum seeker. I think of French schoolteacher Samuel Paty, beheaded by an Islamist who was given refugee status. I think of the woman beheaded near a church in Nice by a Tunisian who arrived in Italy as a boat migrant. I think of the 1,200 women who were viciously sexually assaulted in one night in Cologne on New Year's Eve 2015. The culprits were almost entirely North African or Middle Eastern men. The majority were either asylum seekers, illegal immigrants, or refugees. I think of the Afghan asylum seeker who raped and murdered a teenage girl in Germany before dumping her body in a river. I think of the mentally disabled 11-year-old girl who was raped by an Afghan refugee. And this isn't even to mention the societal dislocation caused by the mass influx of foreign populations who have no desire to integrate or contribute. The UK government has announced that Afghan refugees will be allowed to enter the country without even needing to show a passport. What could possibly go wrong? The previous time the UK began rescuing asylum seekers from war-torn countries, the Royal Navy picked up a refugee in Libya called Salman Abedi. He repaid them by blowing up a bunch of kids at the Manchester Arena. Yeah, you'd have thought we'd learned our lesson by now. Polls show that 99% of Afghans support Sharia law. Good. Well, send them to other Middle Eastern countries where they'll fit in. Europe is full. The UK is full. We already have record numbers of boat migrants arriving anyway, some of whom just rock up on beaches in dinghies and run into the nearest town. We don't even know who these people are, and now we're just going to let in thousands more without even checking their identity. Meanwhile, I'm going to have to show my ID and vaccine passport to go to a football match in my own country. No, enough is enough. If these people are genuine refugees, send them to other Middle Eastern countries, because Europe has already tried experimenting with mass economic migration from these areas of the world, and the consequences were horrendous.